one of the first things artists do after completing a work is sign the piece. You can sign it once it's dry, or even while it's wet, depending on the type of paint and the look you want. The decision is all yours. I will, however, share an experience I had early on in my career that I found to be pretty poignant. I had entered a show and managed to win first prize. Not that I always won first, but in this case I did. After the awards ceremony, the judge came over to me and asked if I would like an explanation on his decisions. I said, of course, I'd love that. So he walked me around and told me the criteria that he used. When he came to a certain piece, he pointed to the painting and said, "Now here's a good painting, but it's ruined by the size of the signature." In his eyes, and I have to agree, now that I've judged a few shows, the signature was so large that it became a distraction. That's a problem. Remember that a signature is there to tell people who did the work. It's a kind of stamp of ownership. But it shouldn't take away from the artistry, so be careful. There are some exceptions. Every once in a while, I'll see an artist whose signature is prominent, not necessarily large, but obvious. But it's handled in such a way as to actually enhance the painting. There's an Australian artist, for example, who signs his watercolors with red paint. It's a bold move. In certain paintings, it really works, and it's actually a pleasing addition. Like in this piece by Van Gogh. It also helps if it's done in a professional manner, like this piece by Sargent. It should be well placed so that it's part of the artistic statement. As we saw previously, if you do decide to use red, you have to be very careful. It can easily go wrong, and it may not work on every painting. Normally, you just want your signature to sit there quietly, available to the viewer if needed. Sometimes artists will even sign the back of the piece instead. I've had to do that on occasion because I personally like my signature to be very subtle, and some paintings have no appropriate spot for it. You should practice what you want your signature to look like. Develop a style, and then repeat that signature on each piece when possible. Practice on paper, and then practice on a simulated surface, perhaps on an old painting that you were going to toss. You can vary your signature by painting medium if you want. I use one style for my watercolors and another for my oils. For watercolor, I use a calligraphy pen, actually, with watercolor paint, and I write Jill Poyerd. But for my oils, I usually just scratch in my initials, or I'll paint the initials on. The typical spot is the lower right corner. Determine what you find appealing. Do you like the whole name being used? Or just a last name? Or just a first name? Or maybe you prefer initials, like I do in my oils. Sometimes masters would even just use a drawing. In fact, in the next lecture, let's take a look at what exactly the masters did when they signed their work. How did they approach it?